Most people who want blue jays in their yard go through the same cycle. They buy a feeder, they fill it with a commercial seed mix that has a blue jay on the label, they hang it somewhere visible, and they wait. Sometimes a jay shows up. More often, they end up feeding a rotating cast of house sparrows and pigeons while the blue jays pass through without stopping, spending maybe 30 seconds in the yard before moving on to somewhere else entirely. And then the cycle repeats. A different feeder, a different mix, the same result. What almost nobody stops to ask is why this keeps happening. Because the answer has nothing to do with finding the right product. It has everything to do with what is missing from the ground itself. Traditional farming communities, including the Amish settlements of Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Indiana, have attracted corvids and other native wildlife for generations without a single commercially manufactured product. Not because they had access to some secret formula, but because the way they structured their land happened to align almost perfectly with what these birds actually need across an entire year, not just during the easy months. When you look at a working traditional farmstead and ask which plants consistently appear on the properties where blue jays are most reliably present, 5 categories emerge again and again. They are not exotic, they are not expensive, and the biology behind why each one works is documented, specific, and genuinely fascinating. The first and most important is the oak tree, belonging to the genus Quercus, and its importance to blue jays goes so far beyond simply providing a food source that calling it that almost undersells the relationship. Blue jays and oak trees have co-evolved over thousands of years into one of the most ecologically consequential partnerships in North American natural history. The mechanism at the center of that partnership is the gular pouch, an elastic, expandable anatomical structure located in the throat of the blue jay, just below the bill. This pouch allows the bird to compress and carry multiple acorns simultaneously, stacked against each other and held in place while the bird carries additional acorns in its bill. From a single oak, a single jay can carry 5 or more acorns per trip, and it will make dozens of trips in a single afternoon during peak autumn caching season. Those cached acorns are buried individually across a wide territory, with each burial site selected and remembered by the bird. But memory across thousands of individual caches is imperfect, and a meaningful portion of those buried acorns are simply never retrieved. They germinate in spring, exactly where the jay left them, at the right depth, in contact with the soil, positioned away from the shade of the parent tree where their survival odds are highest. Ecologists have documented that this behavior was a primary mechanism of oak forest expansion across eastern North America following the last glacial period. The forests that define so much of this continent's landscape were, in a very real biological sense, planted by blue jays. A mature oak in your yard is not just a food source. It is an anchor point for a territorial relationship that can last across multiple generations of birds, each one drawn back to the same reliable location year after year, because the memory of where food was is one of the defining cognitive strengths of every corvid. The second plant is the hickory tree, and it fills a complementary role that oaks alone cannot cover. Hickory nuts are calorie-dense in a way that acorns are not, packed with fat content that makes them particularly valuable as a winter food source. Blue jays approach hickory nuts differently than acorns. The shells are thicker and harder, which means the bird has to work with its bill in a more physically demanding way, wedging the nut into bark crevices and hammering it open with repeated strikes. This is not a problem for a blue jay. It is a feature. Corvids are cognitively stimulated by physical challenge in ways that go beyond simple hunger. A yard that offers only easy, pre-processed food is neurologically less interesting to a blue jay than a yard that offers food requiring problem solving. Hickory trees, like oaks, also provide dense canopy structure suitable for nesting, which is the factor that transforms a yard from a place a jay visits into a place a jay inhabits. And because hickories are native across a wide range of the eastern United States, choosing a species appropriate for your specific region is straightforward, with several options available through native plant nurseries that establish reliably in typical suburban soil conditions. Not every property has room for a mature oak or hickory, And for many homeowners, both of those trees represent a timeline measured in decades rather than seasons. This is where the third and fourth plants become essential, because both operate on a much faster timeline, while delivering comparable ecological value to what they can realistically provide. The third plant is flowering dogwood, and its value to blue jays centers almost entirely on its autumn berry production. Dogwood berries are small, bright red, and extraordinarily high in lipid content, meaning fat. As temperatures drop and the energetic cost of maintaining body heat rises, blue jays shift toward fat, rich foods instinctively, much the way a person heading into a cold winter night craves calorie-dense food over light snacks. Flowering dogwood delivers exactly that, and it does so reliably every autumn, beginning within just a few years of planting. A dogwood shrub reaches meaningful berry production size considerably faster than either an oak or a hickory, making it the most accessible short to medium-term option for homeowners who want results on a human timescale. The fourth plant is native holly, and its particular advantage is persistence. Where dogwood berries tend to be consumed relatively quickly in early autumn, when competition from other wildlife is highest, native holly berries remain attached to the branches through the coldest months of winter, sometimes well into January or February, depending on the region and the severity of the season. This is the period when natural food is scarcest across the landscape, when cached acorns may already be depleted or buried under ice, and when a yard with a reliable visible food source becomes disproportionately valuable in a bird's daily foraging circuit. A blue jay that has mapped your property and knows there is a holly producing berries visible from above will return to check on that food source with a regularity that no commercially filled feeder can sustain through winter conditions. Holly plants are also relatively fast maturing compared to large trees, cold hardy across a wide range of climates, and native species support local insect populations in ways that ornamental non-native hollies do not. For homeowners in the mid-Atlantic and southeastern states, Ilex opaca, the American holly, is a particularly reliable choice that produces fruit abundantly and holds it well into the coldest months. The fifth plant is the one that surprises people most, and it is thick-stemmed native sunflowers. The common assumption is that sunflowers attract birds for their seeds, and while that is true later in the season, the more important relationship between native sunflowers and blue jays happens in spring, and it is entirely indirect. During nesting season, the nutritional profile that a blue jay needs shifts dramatically. The high carbohydrate, high-fat diet of autumn and winter is replaced by a protein priority, driven almost entirely by the demands of raising nestlings. Growing chicks cannot develop properly on seeds and nuts. They need animal protein, and the primary source of that protein for a nesting blue jay is insects, specifically caterpillars, large beetles, and similar soft-bodied arthropods that can be caught, carried back to the nest, and consumed efficiently by young birds. Thick-stemmed native sunflowers, along with other native flowering plants, support dense communities of exactly these insects. The relationship is indirect, but precise. The sunflower does not feed the blue jay. It feeds the caterpillar that the blue jay feeds to its chick. In ecological terms, the sunflower is functioning as a base layer of the food web, and by planting it, you are not offering a single food item to a single bird. You are restoring a piece of the insect community that the entire nesting cycle of a corvid depends on. Traditional farming communities grew sunflowers for grain and oil, not for birds, but the consequence of having them present across the property was a consistently richer insect population during the months when nesting blue jays need protein most. The birds benefited from a plant decision made for entirely unrelated human reasons, and they kept coming back because the food web that plant supported was reliably there. The phrase Amish secret in content about backyard birds is a marketing frame, and it is worth being honest about that. There is no mystical ritual, no guarded knowledge passed down in whispered instructions through farming communities. What the label points toward, when you strip away the storytelling, is something real but considerably less dramatic. It is centuries of practical field observation, made by people who lived in close enough contact with their land to notice which plants consistently produced which results. They grew oaks and hickories because those trees provided timber, shade, and mast crops for livestock. They planted dogwood and holly along fence lines and field edges because those shrubs stabilized soil and provided windbreaks. They grew sunflowers for human and animal food. And the blue jays came, consistently and across generations, not because any of this was designed for them, but because it happened to reconstruct the ecological conditions they depend on. That is the real lesson behind the 5 plants. Each one is doing something specific and biological that no feeder can replicate. The oak and hickory provide the high-value, hard-mast food that triggers caching behavior and builds long-term territorial memory. The dogwood and holly extend the yard's value into the hardest months of the year with fat, rich, and persistent fruit that birds return to when the rest of the landscape is bare. And the native sunflowers rebuild the insect community that makes successful nesting possible in spring. Together, they do not just attract blue jays. They give blue jays a biological reason to stay, to nest, to raise young, and to return year after year with the same motivation their parents and grandparents had before them. Planting all 5 of these at once is not a requirement. Starting with a single dogwood or a handful of native sunflowers already begins the process of shifting what your yard offers and how the wildlife around you perceives it. Every addition moves the needle, and every oak or hickory planted today, however small it is right now, is a decision that compounds in ecological value for decades. The yard does not need to be large to matter. Even a modest suburban lot with 1 dogwood, a cluster of native holly, and a border of sunflowers represents a meaningful patch of restored habitat in a landscape that has lost most of its ecological complexity to lawns and concrete. Scale is not the determining factor. Consistency and plant selection are. The birds are already out there, already flying circuits across your neighborhood every day, already making decisions about which yards are worth their time. Give them a reason to include yours, and they will find it on their own. If you want to keep exploring the real biology behind these backyard relationships, let us know in the comments which plant or bird topic you want covered next. And if this gave you a clearer picture of what your yard could actually become, give it a like and subscribe, because there is a lot more of this coming.